It was an evening like any other. The sun was dipping low on the horizon, painting the quiet little town in shades of gold and pink. A cool breeze moved gently through the trees, carrying the laughter of children and the songs of birds returning home. On the porch of a small wooden house, a little girl sat with her dog, a golden retriever named Max. To her, Max wasn't just a pet. He was her best friend, her secret keeper, the one who always understood her without words. The porch creaked under the little girl's small feet as she sat cross-legged beside Max, her golden retriever. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, and the world seemed calm, ordinary. Yet, inside her heart, she carried something unspoken, something she had never told anyone before. With childlike innocence, she leaned closer to Max, her arms circling his neck in a tender hug. She pressed her lips against his ear and whispered. The words were too soft for the human ear, but somehow they were clear enough for him. His ear flicked. His tail, once wagging lazily, froze mid-motion. He tilted his head, as though processing the meaning of her secret. For a long, silent moment their eyes locked, girl and dog. In that gaze was trust, pure and unbreakable. She smiled faintly, knowing he understood. Nobody else saw the depth of this moment. To the world, it was just a child playing with her dog. But to Max, it was a call to action, a mission only he could fulfill. And in that instant, the bond between them grew into something extraordinary. At first, nothing happened. The girl leaned back, satisfied, patting Max gently on his golden fur. The yard looked the same, the air was still, and the evening was peaceful. But then, something shifted. Max's body stiffened, his head snapped up, and his ears perked sharply toward the distance. His calm, playful demeanor vanished, replaced by an alertness that felt almost unnatural. The little girl blinked, confused. Her parents, who had been watching casually from the living room window, noticed the change too. They exchanged puzzled glances. Why was the dog acting like this? Max's chest rose and fell quickly as he sniffed the air, his muscles tightening like coiled springs. The girl reached out a hand, whispering his name, but Max didn't respond. He was focused on something else, something unseen. Then, without warning, he bolted. His paws pounded against the dirt, sending dust into the air as he charged across the yard. His barks exploded like thunder, sharp, loud, and urgent. The peaceful evening was shattered in an instant. It was no ordinary bark. It was a call, a warning, something that demanded attention. The little girl gasped and stood, her small hands clutching her dress as she watched him disappear toward the far end of the property. Her parents rushed outside, their voices filled with confusion. What had triggered him? Why now after her whisper? Something was happening, something far beyond anyone's understanding. Max's paws struck the ground with unrelenting speed, each stride more powerful than the last. Dust and fallen leaves swirled up behind him as he sprinted across the wide yard. The little girl, breathless with surprise, ran a few steps after him before stopping at the edge of the porch, too small to keep up. Her parents hurried past her, calling Max's name, but the dog didn't falter. His barks grew louder, echoing through the still evening, sharp enough to make the neighbors glance out their windows. The sound was different. This wasn't play, this wasn't mischief. It was a desperate cry for attention. Max skidded to a halt near the farthest corner of the property, where the grass grew wild and unkempt. There, half hidden by vines and shadows, lay the old stone well. Forgotten for years, its wooden cover sagged with rot, its stones cracked with age. The place carried a quiet eeriness, one that kept people away. But tonight, Max circled it furiously, pawing at the ground, his body tense with urgency. Then, through the heavy silence, came a faint sound, a cry. Weak, muffled, but undeniably human. The father froze, his breath caught in his throat. He leaned closer, pressing his ear to the broken wood. Again the voice came, small, trembling, calling out for help. The mother gasped, covering her mouth. In that moment, realization struck them all. Someone was trapped down there. And if not for Max, no one would have ever known. The father's hands shook as he ripped away the rotting wood that covered the well. Each plank broke with a groan, snapping under his grip, releasing the damp smell of earth and stone. He leaned over, his heart pounding in his chest, eyes straining to see into the shadows below. And then he saw them. Two wide, terrified eyes staring back, glistening with tears. A boy, no older than 5 or 6. His tiny hands clung desperately to the jagged stones, his voice weak and trembling. "Help! Please help!" The words echoed up the narrow shaft, filling the family with a chill they would never forget. The mother staggered backward, her breath stolen, one hand clutching her chest as the reality sank in. How long had he been there? How had no one noticed? The little girl, standing close to Max, felt her own eyes water. She gripped her dog's fur tightly, understanding now what her whisper had awakened. Max growled softly, pacing the edge of the well, never taking his eyes off the trapped child. The father shouted for help, his voice carrying across the neighborhood, and within minutes, neighbors came running. Faces turned pale as they peered inside, realizing how close the boy was to being lost forever. The crowd grew silent, overcome with shock. One thing was certain, if not for the little girl's whisper and Max's unshakable loyalty, the boy might have never been found at all. The air buzzed with urgency as neighbors rushed to the scene, ropes and flashlights clutched in trembling hands. The boy's cries echoed faintly from the dark well, each sound weaker than the last, sending shivers down every spine. The father tied the rope securely to a thick wooden post, his fingers fumbling from fear and adrenaline. "Hold it steady!" he shouted, his voice breaking. Two men gripped the rope tightly while another lowered himself carefully down into the darkness. The crowd watched in anxious silence, every creak of the rope echoing like thunder in their ears. The mother knelt on the ground, tears streaming down her face, whispering prayers under her breath. The little girl clung to Max, burying her face in his fur, her tiny heart pounding with fear. Down below, the rescuer reached the boy, wrapping the rope securely around his frail body. "I've got him," the man called up, and a collective gasp of relief swept over the crowd. Slowly, carefully, the boy was lifted upward, his arms trembling as he held tight. The well seemed endless, but inch by inch he rose closer to the surface. At last, small hands emerged, followed by a tear-streaked face. His mother screamed his name and reached out, pulling him into her arms the second he was free. Cheers and sobs filled the night air. The boy coughed, weak but alive, alive because of a whisper, and because a dog had listened. For a moment after the rescue, the world seemed frozen. The boy clung to his mother, his tiny body shaking uncontrollably while she rocked him back and forth, kissing his forehead again and again. The father's shoulders slumped, relief flooding his exhausted frame as he wiped the sweat from his brow. Around them, neighbors exchanged glances of disbelief, their faces pale and their hearts heavy with the thought of what could have happened if no one had arrived in time. The little girl stood silently by Max's side, her small hand gripping his fur with fierce loyalty. She didn't say a word, but her eyes glistened as she watched the boy breathe freely in his mother's arms. Max sat calmly now, his mission complete, though his eyes never left the boy. It was as if he was making sure the child was truly safe. Whispers rippled through the crowd. How had the dog known? How had he led them straight to the well? The answer lingered like a secret in the evening air, unspoken yet undeniable. All they knew was that if not for Max, tragedy would have struck that night. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full. Full of gratitude, of awe, of the realization that something extraordinary had just happened. In that stillness, everyone felt it. They had witnessed more than luck. They had witnessed a miracle. As the crowd began to disperse, questions lingered like smoke in the evening air. People murmured among themselves, their voices low, uncertain. How did the dog know? One neighbor whispered. What made him run straight to the well? Another asked. The father shook his head, still overwhelmed, while the mother held the rescued boy close, refusing to let go. But the little girl remained quiet. She stood beside Max, stroking his fur gently, her eyes filled with something deeper than surprise, something like understanding. Only she knew what had truly sparked this chain of events. She had whispered something into Max's ear, something no one else had heard. Was it just a child's playful secret? Or was it a plea from the heart, a wish only her loyal companion could interpret? Max leaned his head down, brushing against her shoulder as though assuring her he had fulfilled his promise. The girl smiled faintly, but she never revealed her words. That secret remained between them, girl and dog, soul and soul. To the others, it was a mystery. To her, it was the answer, and perhaps that was why she said nothing. Some bonds don't need to be explained. Some miracles are born in silence. Some miracles are born in silence. The boy's family knelt on the grass, overwhelmed with relief, their tears soaking into his hair as they clutched him tightly. Words of gratitude poured out between sobs, blessings spoken aloud to anyone who would listen. Neighbors stood nearby, their faces soft with awe, some holding their children closer, others whispering quiet prayers of thanks. The father shook hands with the rescuers, his voice trembling as he repeated again and again, "You saved him. You saved my boy." But every pair of eyes eventually drifted to Max. The golden retriever sat calmly near the little girl, his chest rising and falling in steady breaths, his fur glowing under the faint silver of moonlight. He didn't seek attention or praise, he simply watched with quiet dignity, his gaze steady, as though he understood his role was finished. The little girl leaned against him, her small body pressed close, her heart swelling with pride. She didn't need anyone to tell her. She already knew her best friend was a hero, and as she looked around at the faces filled with gratitude and wonder, she realized this night would never be forgotten. It was no longer just her secret. It was a story that belonged to everyone who had stood there and witnessed a miracle unfold. Later that night, when the crowd had faded and the boy was safely taken home, the little girl sat once again on the porch. The world was quieter now, but inside her, emotions swirled like a storm. Max lay beside her, his golden coat warm against her hand, his steady heartbeat like a calming drum. She leaned into him, whispering softly again, though this time her words carried no urgency, only love. Max's ears twitched, and he shifted closer, pressing his head gently against her lap. To anyone else, it looked like nothing more than a child cuddling her dog. But to her, it was something sacred. Tonight had proven that their bond wasn't ordinary. He had heard her, understood her, and acted in a way no one could explain. The girl thought about the boy's eyes in the darkness, about the cries that might have gone unheard. She shivered, then hugged Max tightly, knowing he had changed everything with his loyalty. And Max, with no words at all, reassured her. In his silence, he spoke louder than any human could. Between them, there was no need for explanations. It was an unspoken bond, one that went beyond language, beyond reason. It was pure, unbreakable trust. As the stars scattered across the night sky, the events of the day lingered in every heart that had witnessed them. The little girl's parents tucked her into bed, still shaken by the miracle they had seen. Yet even as they kissed her forehead and whispered their love, they couldn't help but glance once more at Max, who lay quietly at the foot of her bed, like a guardian angel in golden fur. The girl smiled drowsily, her eyes heavy with sleep, but her heart wide awake with understanding. She knew that her whisper had carried more than words. It had carried trust, hope, and something only Max could understand. Outside, the rescued boy slept safely in his own home, his family holding him closer than ever before, their gratitude unending. And though no one would ever know exactly what the girl had said, they all knew the truth that mattered most. Sometimes the smallest voices spoken with love can spark the greatest miracles. The lesson was clear to everyone who remembered that night. Never underestimate the quiet bonds that tie us together. Never doubt the silent strength of love, loyalty, and trust. For even a whisper, when spoken from the heart, has the power to save a life. And so, what began as an ordinary evening became a story that no one would ever forget. A little girl's whisper, a dog's unshakable loyalty, and a life saved against all odds. It wasn't magic, nor coincidence. It was the power of love, trust, and the unspoken bond between humans and animals. The lesson is simple, yet profound. Even the smallest voice, when filled with love, can bring about the greatest change. Never ignore kindness, never doubt loyalty, and never underestimate the strength of a heart that listens. 'Cause sometimes, even a whisper can save the world. You were touched by this story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming tales that remind us of the beauty hidden in life's simplest moments.